Overwatch 2 Rise of Disappointment, sorry, Rise of Darkness is here, and these are the retail patch notes that will go live later tonight for me. And well, if you're in the US of A's, then this is going to go live for you the morning or afternoon that you guys are up. I don't know, but it's going to go live today at some point. By the time you watch this video, it'll probably be a few more hours than it's going to be out. So let's get straight into it. We got a new map. We got the Halloween Terror. Yeah, that's all good and all. Let's start talking about the hero reworks and the actual patch notes, because I did watch it last night, and I want to start giving my thoughts on it. I didn't see everything, but the major ones that I did see, I was extremely disappointed. I'm not going to lie, this is by far the worst patch that Overwatch 2 has ever seen, and I'm going to explain why a little bit later. Anyways, let's start with the Sombra rework. So this is the really detailed one. I was originally thinking of doing a video on it, but honestly, I'm going to try and keep this video a little bit like in the 10-11 minute mark. The TLDR of this rework is more power is in her machine pistol than there is in hack and virus. The idea for Sombra's new playstyle is she's now more of a brawl DPS, and she's less of a stealth hacker that wants to get into the backline. Rather, the safest way to play her now is to play like with your tank, harass the enemy tank, bombard them with your abilities, and then move on to now applying pressure to the rest of the characters in front of you. So in a weird way, it's kind of like the style of play that you're basically looking at is the way that Reaper and May like to play, where like okay, like maybe Reaper's a better one. Like Reaper kind of wants to hug the tank and walk forward with them to the other tank, and then start flanking. And sometimes you can do some silly things to pressure a backline, but with Sombra's translocator change, that shouldn't be a priority. Now, what is the translocator change? Because it's a really big one. She cannot place it down and then TP to it by tapping E again. So translocator is basically like now when you throw it after like about basically like a second, if I'm not mistaken, or 0.25 seconds of being thrown, you're going to teleport to it like 0.25 seconds later. I've seen some gameplay of it. It looks a little bit wonky, but it'll just take a little bit of getting used to. I do think like Sombra's whole playstyle of now being a flanker or taking off angles to pressure somebody by obviously flanking them, it's basically dead. Like you're like a version of May. Like you're like a new May. Like you kind of want to stay with your tank, apply pressure, and to the enemy tank and bombard them with the hack and all of this, and then kind of move on from there. So that's Sombra. EMP took a bit of a nerf. Hack also is a little bit took a bit of a nerf. The patch notes are on the screen, so I don't want to focus too much on Sombra. I think you guys might have already seen the Sombra changes. We want to talk about the rest of the patch notes. Now, there's one thing in here that I don't know how to feel. I want to ask your guys' opinion. It's this group respawn thing. Now, I do think that this is an attempt for Blizzard to try and make the game feel less steamrolly. And one of the things they may have noticed is that, okay, the trickle down effect is that people, like one or two people die, and then they're like, um, they just keep trickling themselves in. They keep dying, and then you never actually take team fights because it's like one guy just being a superhero, next guy being a superhero, rinse and repeat, right? So it says over here that heroes who die within 5 seconds of each other will respawn together, resulting in slightly longer or shorter queue than the standard 10 seconds. So to be honest, to a certain extent, maybe this could even be abused. We don't know, right? So they say that basically you will now spawn with your team. Like heroes who die more than 5 seconds from another player will spawn with the 10 seconds. Um, but the idea is that it's to group up people to go and leave spawn together rather than one by one a person leaves spawn, etc., right? So this is like this is going to be like very crucial going forward. Because while this isn't going to be in ranked, and thank goodness for that, like if you're in ranked, you pretty much always try to stay with the team and everything. In unranked, this is going to be interesting. Another unranked change that's supposed to be like in their eyes, it's supposed to be a quality of life change, is rather than removing rather than stripping you of the 75% XP of the battle pass, now they're going to put you on suspension for 10 minutes and 30 minutes depending on the amount of games you leave. So how this is going to work is that the penalty threshold has not changed, but if in the last 20 games, if you leave 4 of those 20 games that are happening consecutively, you will get the first threshold penalty, which is 10 minutes, and then after that, 30 minutes. Now, I don't know if there's anything more beyond that, but you won't be allowed to play quick play. Arcade and competitive, I'm not sure, but for unranked, that's going to be the case. So, another thing that they've basically introduced is the concept of consecutive match XP bonus has been renamed to endurance bonus, and that endurance bonus is granted when finishing matches without leaving a previous one. So this is just for the people that backfill, is to just give them like a little bit more pat on the back, like, hey, thanks for kind of sticking around, right? Story missions, you can now spectate people playing it, nobody cares. Hero mastery, like, this is a nice quality of life change. It's not that like if you're playing the hero mastery here and there, like the bonus score granted from time remaining in the gold bonus tier is now accurate to 100 of a second, etc., etc. So I don't know if this is supposed to help with hero mastery or make it harder, but it also supports replay, so that's nice. Player progression, lowered show priority for time played and win sub badges in the showcase, added fire skills for Sombra. Again, I don't really care about this. Honestly, the hero mastery, like, it's cute, but it's just like a thing that's there for you to feel good about. It's nothing too much. Now, reduce the wins. I feel like this wasn't talked about a bit. Reduce the number of wins required to unlock Torjborn, Queen, and Kiriko to the hero challenges. So it seems like the first set of heroes that came out, like, they'll be easier to unlock compared to the others. I don't like, I hope this is consistent across the board, because it is going to feel really weird if just these few are the ones that are affected and not everybody else. It doesn't say anything about Life Fever or Ramatra or Illari, so I might jump on my 700 other accounts I have and have a peek at this with you guys when the season goes live. Now to the disappointment. Orisa's damage reduction went from 50% to 45. We're further readjusting Orisa's survivability. You know what? This doesn't even matter. They're saying things like, we want her to be an effective pick against teams that lean on crowd control. But what they fail to understand is Orisa is not picked to deal with crowd control. Like, I don't think that's the first thought process. That she's picked, number one, because she can tank a lot of damage. That's like the number one thing people think about is, oh, I don't have to worry about damage, I don't have to worry about getting blown up, etc., etc., right? The next thing that we have on the side to talk about as well is, again, this damage reduction. She did get a bit of an HP recovery reduction with her overhealth. Like, when you kind of put that two together, yes, her overall survivability is down, but this isn't the area that you should be targeting. What you should be targeting is her near picture perfect cooldown rotation, that when Fortify goes down, like, you can use your E, your javelin spin, and then your spear, and then by the time you've rotated the first set of cooldowns, the next one comes online. When that goes offline, the next one is online, and the cycle basically repeats. Orisa's really good at that. Now, maybe that might be by design, but increasing one or two of these cooldowns should allow for Orisa to feel a little bit more contestable, especially for the tank role, because while DPS and supports can kind of ignore the tank, and well, now Illari can snipe people and DPS can kind of flank around and go for the backline. The tank to tank battle for Orisa against other tanks is so much in Orisa's favor right now. And we know that Zarya is getting nerfed. And with Zarya kind of getting nerfed a little bit, it's so hard for there to be a reliable way to fight against Orisa. Because, again, like, she has an amazing tank matchup against everybody, right? Like, against every tank in the game, she has a good matchup against except Zarya. And the buff that Zarya got to help her out against Orisa is so, is basically gone. Like, the projected barrier. Now, this doesn't necessarily help Zarya against Orisa in a direct way, but in an indirect way, like, the thing that people were trying, at least, I play in high elo, so the thing we were doing nowadays was, like, you would toss, like, your Zarya and the Bastion or Torb on your team to, like, frontline aggressively, and when they would take the pressure, like, you would put bubble on them, and then Zarya would walk up in front of them, bring her bubble up, and then, like, Orisa suddenly felt so much burst damage her way, right? With this kind of taking a reduction, it basically forces Zarya back into a selfish playstyle, and again, it doesn't solve the problem. Now, Ram and Wrecking Ball have some changes in here. For Ramatra, it's like, okay, we're lowering his cooldown from 8 to 7, but honestly, it doesn't even matter. Like Orisa is still going to gatekeep Ram from playing the game because she's just really good at dealing with Ramatra and denying him, like, what he wants to do. And I don't know, like, Ram probably can come into the game, but again, Orisa being still incredibly powerful is just not the right direction for the game. This change for Ram is nice, but it's not something over the top that will, like, put him to meta relevancy. He's just going to be the problem with every other Brawl tank right now, is every Brawl tank just insta loses to Orisa simply because Orisa just makes sure that they can never brawl. This then brings us to Wrecking Ball. So Wrecking Ball, if you guys haven't seen the Fall of Ball video by, I believe 𝐒𝐿 did it, so give it a watch because he does a great job of explaining how mostly supports, particularly 𝐒𝐿𝐶, has just ruined, Wrecking Balls and the way he's supposed to play and what he benefited from, as well as the tank passive. So they try to put Wrecking Ball's power into his guns, where the shots, before the maximum spread is applied, it has been increased from 20 to 30. I don't see this changing anything for Wrecking Ball in particular. Again, Wrecking Ball has a terrible matchup against Orisa, and Orisa can do a good job of just javelin spinning him all over the place, using her spear to throw him around the map, and just kind of excellent peel, excellent poke against Wrecking Ball, who's constantly taking damage against poke comps. So it's just not good for Ball. Like the solution to this is to get rid of this poke meta that we've entered, and unless they either nerf supports or we see more power creep, this meta is not going to shift. And unfortunately, it seems like they are doubling down slowly on the power creep, and I'll show you in a moment why, right? So we've covered most of the tanks. Zarya got the, revert to her friendly barrier. Coming down to the damage roll, Cassidy gets the most useless change I've ever seen in the history of the damage roll, and that is basically when he uses combat roll, the damage reduction increase is 50% to 75. So Pulse Bomb is now even more of a cosmetic, and this has already been tested by other content creators. This allows Cassidy to point blank range tank the damage from a Riptire. It is so like, this is one of those like things where in very, very tiny niche scenarios it might make a difference, but it doesn't solve the problem with Cassidy. It's the fact that they nerfed his range. And this is going to be a blazing hot take, but when you kind of put 2 and 2 together, it makes sense. I personally think the reason Cassidy got nerfed, because in their internal playtesting, they realized Cassidy was doing a really good job of keeping Illari in check. And I feel like Cassidy just kind of got like slapped on the face simply because, God forbid, DPS players can actually contest support players. And that's the only reason that I can see why Cassidy had his range further guttered, right? And Cass is really, really bad. He's like bottom 5, bottom 3 DPS right now. The only thing he needs, and I'm even willing to say, like, trade away the 225, like, stop making him this weird tanky character that they keep trying with him. Otherwise, just moving to the tank role at this point, we could use like a nice, hit scan tank, cowboy, whatever. I'm just joking, obviously. But like, you could reduce his HP down to 200 and then give him his mini sniper rifle back that at mid to short ranges, he's dominant. This is just like, this is one of those things where honestly it really makes you think that they don't play their own game. Like, this adjustment allows Cassidy to be more intentional with his rolls to avoid large amounts of damage with correct timing. Like, who in their right mind enters a team fight with Cass and thinks, yup, gonna use combat roll to avoid all this damage and then get a kill? Like who is doing this, Blizzard? I'm sorry, but like, Alec Dawson and his balance team have constantly shown they don't understand what's going on with this game. All the way back from Season 1. I was saying this in Season 1. And that was when they said that the problem with Sojourn and Genji and why they were dominant was the damage roll passive. Sojourn's problems were a little bit more streamlined in her projectile, right? When they came down to Genji, Genji's damage was a little bit silly, and he was doing a little bit too much because of the passive. But they specifically said that they were going to monitor Genji from the perspective that they would first remove the effect of the passive and see what happens to Genji. They didn't do just that. They also guttered Genji's damage to the lowest it's ever been. And while it's okay in some scenarios, it's still bad in a lot of scenarios because of how high healing is. And we see, and my point with the Genji example is this constant philosophy of them constantly showing us that they don't understand what makes a character strong or weak. I even have a video of Alec Dawson where he basically had the audacity to come out and say, we don't understand what makes Genji strong, when the Nano Blade combo has been there for 6 years plus. And every player has basically said that, yeah, well, the only thing like that's really tough to deal with is Nano Blade because it's a one-shot combo. So it's one of those things that the point of this is that, like, when it comes to Cassidy, people don't like it because, like, Cass having the ability to do damage is fine. It's when he becomes too tanky does it become incredibly frustrating to deal with. And again, this is one of those things where they just don't understand the character and they pull something like this. You want to know another character that they don't understand? Mei. They've been literally like ping-ponging with Mei back and forth, unable to find an identity for her in 5v5. And at this point, it's like, man, I'm really thinking we really should go back to 6v6 because this little experiment of theirs is not working. But even then, I think, well, it doesn't matter because even if we go back to 6v6, if this balance team never ever understands how to balance the characters, we're just going to constantly run in the circle where they're just confused and like shrugging their shoulders. Mei's change is Deep Chill has been removed. And the Endothermic Bastion now immediately applies a 40% slow, because that's very fun to play against, by the way. And her damage has been increased from 70 to 100. So she's kind of back to the old school Mei, But if I'm not mistaken, like, can somebody please clear it up for me? Did Mei have this, like the slow by 40%? Did she have this in season 1 and I believe early season 2? Or was it just the 100 damage and trying to apply pressure? Because like this maintains the frustration of the slow, and it allows Mei to burst down targets. Like this will allow Mei, like if we were going into a brawl meta, this would be good. Like there is a potentiality that brawl could slightly come back with Ram and Mei, and this version of Sombra, and maybe that takes care of Orisa, because Orisa is completely open to getting shredded by Sombra. But I don't know, because it might just backfire, right? Like it might just, like, maybe Orisa's like, okay, I don't care, fortify, E, spear, I'm fine. High healing, Suzu, this, that. Like there's so many variables that it's like, man, we really got to look at the support role at some point. Anyways, Torjborn, dude, this is the biggest slap on the wrist that Torjborn has, like, that I've ever seen. The primary fire recovery increase 0.48 to 0.51. You know what? I'm not even gonna say anything about that. Like, this is not that. This is nothing. This is nothing. Okay. Overload bonus health gone from 100 to 75. Why not to 50? Why does Torjborn need to be a mini tank? Right? And when you, again, you have to think about, like, when you pair all of this with the amount of healing in the game and the immortality abilities and all the cheesiness with pylon and turrets, why do we need to turn him into a mini tank? Right? And they're just like, oh yeah, by the way, Torbjorn's Rivet Gun is overwhelming, so his offense is overwhelming. And then it's like, oh yeah, his overload is overwhelming because it's too defensive. It's just like, dude, pick a side. Do you want him to be like this passive mini tank that can support from afar? Or do you want him to be like this aggressive, like machine gun, like poke guy with lava sticks being shot out into your face? Like, they just can't decide the identity of what they want for Torb. His turret has been nerfed, the Rivet Gun is still fine, and Overload, despite what it might seem, it's still fine because he's a poke, more often than not, he's a poke character, and against dive, so whenever you play Winston or Diva or even Doomfist, if you know what you're doing on Torb, and anybody that plays Torbs, they know this, right? It is very easy to burst down the dive tanks, because I believe they changed the spread on his right clicks. So he still has a lot of substantial buffs that keep him viable. And this is just not enough. So it's just like, okay, Torb is still good. Bastion got the little slap on the wrist, and still Bastion is good. Orisa is still good. All the stuff that was supposed to deal with them is just kind of gone, right? Like Zarya has taken a hit. They're trying to bring in Ram and Mei to deal with this poke comp. It's like, yeah, you're telling me that a brawl comp that needs time to get into the face of a poke comp is going to be the thing that tries to slow them down? Listen, the only saving grace of something like this actually working is if the new Mei or the new Sombra turn out to be a lot better. But the difference about Mei in season 1 and early season 2 was support wasn't as broken and didn't have the tools that they did back then. Now support does. So that's why I don't have that much hopes for Mei and Sombra, because there's too much from the support side of things that can still negate their value. So it's either we power creep DPS and tank, or we deal with support. And surprise, surprise, guess what they did? Support as a role is still strong, and a certain support who didn't perform well this meta simply because it's like a poke meta, so she's a little bit irrelevant here and there. They decided that her whip shot gets the damage increased to 80. We also saw an irrelevant change like this with Junker Queen, who got her Jagged Blade to go up, and this has gone up to 80. And this change increases her proficiency at protecting her allies by rewarding accuracy with her most aim focus ability. How does this protect her allies? When is it like, okay, the whip shot is used to boop away like a jumping Winston or a flying Diva. At best, that's what you use it for, right? After that, you're just perma using whip shot to trigger Inspire. Like your intention is, oh god, I need to trigger Inspire or else we all die. Nobody thinks about, I'm going to save my whip shot in order to protect an ally. Like this is just an excuse for them to say that, oh, Tracer and Genji weren't dead enough. We want to make sure that they never get the chance to play the game again. Like Tracer has, also with this change, Brick can do her one-shot combo perfectly on Tracer. I believe on Tracer, it's one swing, one bash, and one melee, right? If I'm not mistaken. And how is Tracer supposed to play the game? There are so many things in support now that passively counter Tracer's existence. Even in the current poke meta, like Tracer into Torb and Illari. Just need these two. Forget Orisa and Bastion and anybody else, right? You just need Torb and Illari, and that two turrets, like one turret that can pressure Tracer and the Torb turret, and then another turret that is just like, if the Tracer gets into the backline, is just constantly healing them all the time and forcing the Tracer to look up there, that's more than enough time for any decent Illari to delete the Tracer from the game. And it's so hurtful to see that all the high skill heroes in this game are basically being pushed into a bullied state of, no, you're not allowed to play the game, and if you want to play Tracer, if you want to play Genji, if you want to play Winston, if you want to play Doomfist, you have to perform 10 times as much to get the value that an Illari gets for pressing E and healing yourself, or what Torb does when he presses E, or when you pick Bastion and hit shift, or when you pick Orisa and you tap shift E and right click. Like, it's unbelievable to see the direction of this game. Like, I've tried my level best to keep my cool and everything, right? And the seasons are supposed to be massive meta shifts. This is how it's always been, right? This is how it's always been, that they have said that the seasons are supposed to be meta shifts and all this type of stuff, right? And it's not. The final change is Illari's solar rifle getting the healing per second decrease from 120 to 105. And I hate this change. I cannot stress it. I hate this change. First of all, like, her power is never in the solar rifle. Like, if anybody uses solar rifle, this number, this 120 number, it looks really high, but on paper, when you're actually using it, it's like a healing over time. And it doesn't happen like instantaneously, right? It builds up, and if the target is taking damage, you actually feel like the 120 is not doing enough. The real strength is when the pylon is pumping that healing, and then you combo it with solar, right? We all know that the main frustration from the player base is the pylon itself. So why strip the power from something that isn't what people are frustrated with? Nobody in their right mind, Illari has been out. I don't even think bronze players. There's never been a case where anybody has complained about solar rifle, of all things. And that's what they aim for. And this is just another way for them to say, okay, well, you know, forget solar rifle, just go take an off angle and delete the pesky DPS. Aren't you happy with the state of support? This just feels like Illari's burst healing output is still a little too high. So we're lowering the effectiveness of solar rifle. Is solar rifle the thing that's like a third body that is also very tanky, can regen itself and pump healing? Or is it the solar rifle, or is it the pylon? And they're just like, no, it's clearly the solar rifle, guys. It's clearly the solar rifle. That's the reason why Illari is insane. And man, I swear to God, like, the fact that the fact that there is no meta shift, essentially. The fact that the meta heroes were like got another set of slaps on the wrist that doesn't change their playstyle or doesn't open windows to punish them, right? The only thing you perhaps could have done is, okay, you didn't want to touch Torb and Orisa and Bastion and all these guys too much because you don't want them to feel overwhelmingly weak. The next set of nerfs that you could do is actually nerf the healing in the game in order to make sure that sustainability isn't too high, or you buff up the damage on dive characters because dive is essentially somewhat dead. Right, like the dive-like playstyle is just if you want to get deleted in the fraction of a second, play a dive-like playstyle. Like when you play Winston now, you're like implying that Orisa isn't in the lobby. You can get away with like the dive playstyle and just kind of like, you know, tickling people and things like that. But the second they pick Orisa or Diva or Reaper and all this into you, you have to go swap. You have to go swap. There's nothing you can do about it. The rock paper scissors problem didn't get dealt with. The poke meta problem hasn't been dealt with. The major, like, the support problem hasn't been dealt with that we've been talking about for 2-3 weeks now. And if anything, they buffed the support. They buffed the Brigitte. And now it's like, okay, well, now if you try to dive a Brig, imagine you're playing a dive character, right? And Whipshot is not that hard to land. It has a fairly good like travel time. It's a really decent projectile. It's got a big like hitbox on what it can and cannot hit. I've personally tested this myself. And now you can't contest Brig as well because now you're fearful that, okay, if I touch Brig even for a second, I can get deleted in the fraction of a second. How is this supposed to make the game fun for tank and DPS? It really, really feels like this game has become Support Watch 2. Supports can do this, supports can do that. Support has Brigitte as an option now. Supports have Illari, who still is incredibly strong. They have Ana, they have Bap. Life Weavers is actually like a quiet hero on the backline that is like oppressive and nobody's talking about it. We'll talk about him in tomorrow's video when I plan to address the deployment creep that has happened in the game. That makes it feel like double shield. And it legit feels like we're back in double shield, where sustain is too high, nothing is dying. You have to play the Orisa character where nothing dies. And if you dare to try playing anything else, you just lose the game. Nice hero options and some other quality of life changes, but other than that, like, this is by far the most disappointing patch. Lighting changes happen. Route 66 got a design update, like the map got slightly reworked, which is like Route 66 was one of the most balanced maps. I don't think anybody complained about it. Bug fixes here and there don't really, like, nothing too much to, like, look on. But it's so incredibly disappointing that, you know, there was another content creator, and their justification, I won't say any names, I'm not trying to catch drama here, but they tried to change perspectives, and they were like, well, they don't need to do a massive meta shift simply because, like, they're introducing a new hero in Sombra, and maybe she might shift the meta. And it's like, okay, that's a valid point. If it wasn't for the fact that Sombra hasn't been reworked to the scale of Orisa and Doomfist, where like majority of what they do is very different to their Overwatch 1 playstyle, Sombra's playstyle is still going to be like permahack the enemy tank and then just go in and continue shooting people until EMP comes online, EMP the enemy team, rinse and repeat. Like, can we just like stop this narrative that Sombra has gone in such a massive shift that she will save the game? Because in my personal opinion, like, if the meta stays the same, and again, I haven't haven't played or felt the new Sombra yet, so I can't say. And obviously, the people that did get to test it, they're playing on a very limited sample size with people with ranks from all over the place. So sometimes some things can be skewed, right? I do plan on making a Sombra guide and everything, but my statement over here is, even with that new hero coming into the game, shifting away the stuff that people did not like to play against shouldn't be gatekept because, oh, we're bringing a new hero or a rework into the game. You bring the rework and you change up the game so that everything feels all over the place. You create that chaotic playstyle in Overwatch that everybody loves, where nobody knows what's meta, nobody knows what's going on, and then let people experiment for the first month or so, figure it out, and then once you see what's kind of like, you know, settling down, you then deal with it in the mid-season patch, balance it out, and then let this cycle continue. That's how balancing is supposed to be. And they're just like, their balancing philosophy is pretty much just shrug. Like, okay, guys, throw the dart. Who does the target hit? Oh, okay, Moira. All right, let's overbuff Moira. And let's tell everybody that Moira isn't performing as a support because Illari has become the better DPS. Zenyatta is not performing for whatever reason. And then next thing you know, Zen and Moira get buffs. But by God's name, dude, if Zen and Moira are the next supports that somehow get random buffs out of nowhere, first of all, I called it. And second of all, we're screwed. Because it doesn't seem like they care about tank or DPS as a role. They don't care about making tank healthier to play. And no, Orisa doesn't count. And they don't care about what DPS are fun to play, that people do want to play. And they're like, no, don't play these high skill characters. Play the Maze, play the Torjborns, play the Bastions, sit there and hold one button and enjoy the game. And I'm sorry, that's just not enjoyable. If people disagree or whatever, you're entitled to your own opinion. But when Overwatch won Game of the Year in 2016, they did not win it because of Mei, Bastion, Torjborn, Orisa. They didn't win it because of that. They were winning stuff like this because of the high intensity, high octane gameplay. The characters like Genji, characters like Winston, Diva, Tracer, Mercy, Lucio. These OG characters that brought this extremely fun perspective to the first-person shooter genre, all these characters are just bad now. And it's never a coincidence. There's always been a saying in the high elo community, right? If Reinhardt and Winston from the tank role are bad, and from the DPS role, Genji and Tracer are bad, the game is in a bad spot. And that's just the harsh reality of it. If you're a casual player that doesn't care about balance and all this type of stuff and just wants to do whatever you want, these patches are amazing for you. It's amazing to drop in, play the game for an hour and leave. You will not feel these patch notes. You will never feel these patch notes. But the most amazing thing for that is that this game is for you. They're balancing it for you. They don't care about competitive. They made changes. They told when Aaron Keller responded to SK's video about the problems in competitive, he was like, yeah, the competitive changes, they'll come next year. Like, we know competitive has problems, it'll come next year. But the group up spawn changes and the unranked lever penalties, they wanted their casual mode to have quality of life changes before the competitive mode. And we wonder, like, why as a franchise this game is falling apart? It's incredibly depressing. It's incredibly depressing. Ranked is a joke. This season of Ranked, I don't even know if I'll play it. It's just really depressing to see what has happened. The new map looks great. The event looks fun. It's just all over the place. It's just, this game, like, the patch notes are just all over the place. Like, the fact that at the end of this patch, support as a role won. And by the way, if Sombra ends up viable, Brig is forced into the meta because she's good against Sombra and just the usual style of Sombra and what she can do. Brig can gatekeep Sombra for being good, and then they might overbuff Sombra, right? Because they've clearly shown they don't want to nerf support. And no, the solar rifle change to Illari does not count. This thing is barely felt in general, and Illari players barely use it in general. There's like, what, maybe 1 second every 2-3 team fights that solar rifle is actually used. Because that's not what they want from Illari. They want her to drop the pylon, let it sit with the team, and her to be this like extra DPS. And then my question is this: what's the point of the DPS role then? If supports can do everything better, if supports can tank better, if supports can negate these things better, if they can damage better, what's the point? Anyways, I've ranted longer enough. I really wanted this patch to be good. We're still gonna stream tonight when the patch comes out, but my disappointment is just unmeasurable. It is really sad to see that Alec Dawson's balance team has constantly shown they don't understand this game. They really don't. And a part of me really wishes we could get Jeff Goodman back. Jeff Goodman had a lot of misses, but at least there were times where he understood the assignment and he followed up on it. Yeah, he messed up a lot, but it took him 6 years to mess up. At least he experimented with the game in different ways. And okay, how can I try to control this better and all this type of stuff, right? I know there's a full team behind this, and I know for a fact that there are some people of Jeff Goodman's team still left with Alec Dawson and everything. But the leader, the vision from Alec Dawson compared to Jeff Goodman, I'm sorry, but Alec Dawson failed this game in less than a few seasons. But it took Jeff Goodman the rise of Overwatch 2 to give up on Overwatch 1. Like, I'm fairly certain that's what happened, right? That they were just like, hey, no, go focus on Overwatch 2 and 5v5. And just kind of like, you know, every now and then give 6v6 a nice little kiss. I don't know, man. It's really sad to see. It's really sad to see. Like, this season is just going to be even worse than Season 6. With that being said, if you guys want to support the channel, the free ways to do it are hitting like, dropping a comment about your opinion about Season 6, and hitting subscribe. It helps with the algorithm. I'm sorry, my mood is really off. I really was hoping for a better patch. We're still in Ursa meta. And I hope to see you guys on the front line playing tank, realizing that there's nothing we can do about it.